So today is Friday 12th of January 2018, and in 56 days it will be Friday the 9th of March 2018. And that is the birthday of my partner and my best friend. I've got a prediction for that date too, Tropical Cyclone Riley and maybe Savannah. And the time 9:45 could be part of this. And this is a prediction that's being helped, I've been helped in coming up with this prediction in knowing this information, I guess, because I've sort of connected over the years with a few different kids that have been victims of bad stuff. There's a boy, Ralph Morris, who was murdered, a girl, Ebony Simpson, who was murdered, a boy, Jacob Wetterling, who was murdered, and a boy, Nathan Breeze, who died in a bushfire. And the four of them are young people that I've sort of connected with spiritually. And full credit goes to them if this prediction is true. And I also, in my life, have suffered quite a lot of trauma. I was bullied pretty badly when I was 12. And then shortly after that, I was the victim of a sexual predator in a park after I wandered away slightly from a school picnic at the end of year 7. And these are things I told Immigration and Border Protection in applying for a partner visa after they encouraged me to apply for a partner visa, for which I paid a $7,000 or just under $7,000 application fee, only to have the application rejected after having no information after more than a year. This awful government department, headed by Peter Dutton, also blocked my partner from returning to Australia on a visitor visa on the grounds that he had an outstanding conviction. And that was because he had bought an iPad or a tablet off somebody at his work, not knowing that it was a stolen item. It is an offence, but it's not like he went down the street and started shooting people as Donald Trump joked he could do, and people would still vote for him. It's like there's one set of rules for one set of people and another set of rules for all the rest. So they denied, I had to threaten to make a prediction to do with bushfires before immigration even granted a visitor visa. And I guess they could see I was pretty pissed off. I was pretty pissed off, but not as pissed off as I am now. How dare they do this to me? How dare they? And to think that the worst bullies I've ever come across in my life turned out to be the government, it does make you wonder. It really does. And there's a couple of things in this news I'm about to play that really go to the heart of what I'm saying here and to the heart of why I'm making this prediction and why I want this to be a message against people like Peter Dutton, MP, Minister for Home Affairs now in Australia, and President Donald Trump of the United States, and just the attitude that they embody. They bully, they intimidate, they lie. They live and breathe propaganda. They are populists who just play on people's fears in order to have power. And it's kind of interesting because this book is part of the inspiration also for my prediction, partly because red rain, if you add up the letters R-E-D, R-A-I-N, according to their places in the alphabet, those letters have the same value as Riley. And this is a story that does actually involve a hurricane. It also involves 12-year-old identical twins. One of them's a killer, Samuel, but he's actually more likable than his brother. His brother Daniel is the power-hungry, manipulative, scheming one of the two. And he's the one that I would describe as the evil twin. The one who has more in common with the people I'm making my prediction against. Against these people that enjoy having power over ordinary people and playing on people's fear in order to win the vote at election time. I'm also really disappointed because I went to my local member's office and he said, I didn't speak to my local member, Mike Kelly. I did speak to the person who looks after immigration matters in his office, and the lady I spoke to was extraordinarily rude in her attitude of, yes, we understand that. When I started talking about the fact that I was the victim of something pretty atrocious as a kid, something to which I easily could have reacted by committing suicide, either to the bullying or to the incident involving the sexual predator who was a stranger. Yeah, it's pretty bad. It's pretty bad when the government just turns a blind eye to all that, when they claim that they're trying to assist people in not committing suicide, and because they banned my partner from the country, because he had just overstayed his visa, and there were so many mitigating circumstances that we explained. We tried to go to immigration and we missed seeing them because it was a public holiday. There was a lot of things happen. After he left the country, they were so cold and so unhelpful. And it made me realize that government really does not care about individuals at all. It is so cold, so uncaring, so heartless and cruel. Crueler than any of the people I've described. Like the bullying I copped was bad. I'm sure the sexual predator, and I know he was a sexual predator, I'm sure he was very evil. But like I said with the twins, the killer, he's more likable in this story than his power-hungry, scheming brother. And that's how I've come to regard the government as being like the evil twin in that story. They just enjoy having power over people. So I ended up in a psych unit, being bullied by psychiatrists who said, you will take the medication we're prescribing for you, or we will hold you down and we will forcibly inject you. That was my experience after my partner left. And when I mentioned that my partner had been banned from the country and that's why I was suicidal, the response I got from someone in this psychiatric unit, which was Chisholm Ross Psychiatric Unit in Goulburn, New South Wales, was, what, do you want us to fix your immigration issues as well? And it's like, as well? That is actually the cause of the reason I was in there. It was the cause of my depression, it was the cause of my shock and my trauma, was my partner being banned from the country. You guys claim to care about people. It's the biggest joke. And for everything they say in this news bulletin about you've got one side of politics blaming the other, Labor blaming Liberal, well, I'm sorry, but my experience when I went to my local member on a personal issue regarding the $7,000 that I've been ripped off for a fee that I never should have paid, been talked into even applying for that partner visa, I never had a chance of it being processed because the Minister for Immigration and Border Protection is a homophobe and he's racist and he's against people of colour, and my counsellor tried to warn me about all of that. I decided to trust in the system, and I am very sorry that I did. I'm extremely sorry I put my trust in the Australian government, and I never will again. And come the next election, I can tell you now, I'll be leaving my ballot paper blank in the House of Reps. I'll be voting in the Senate, and it won't be for Liberal or Labor.
This is Newsday.
It's 3 o'clock in Melbourne, midday here in Perth. I'm Danica DiGiorgio. Thanks for joining us. Our top story this hour. Friends and family of Dolly Everett have gathered in the Northern Territory town of Katherine to farewell the 14-year-old. The teenager took her own life last week after being relentlessly bullied on social media. Sky News Northern Australia correspondent Matt Cunningham joins me now live. Matt, her parents have just given a very emotional statement there. They say they want to raise the issue to stop this from happening again.
That's right, Danica. It was a really touching moment as her parents spoke to the media here in the playground at the Casuarina Street primary school in Catherine East, the same primary school where Dolly began her schooling 9 years ago. So sad to think that just 9 years after she began school here, she has now taken her own life after she was subjected to that relentless bullying. But her parents at this press conference here, they remembered the happy side of their daughter. They spoke about a girl who was fun-loving, who loved animals so much. She loved her horses. They said she loved anything with 4 legs and anything with 2 legs, that she was just such a kind-hearted person. Her father also told the story of how she came to get the nickname Dolly. He said in true Northern Territory cattleman style that he was running late to the birth, and when he arrived and Amy arrived as well, she said that her mother said that she was just like a perfect little China doll, and the name Dolly stuck and has stuck ever since. But they also talked about the serious side of today, and that is this campaign that they have been running to raise awareness around cyberbullying and youth suicide, and the foundation that they have now established called Dolly's Dream. Here's a little bit of what they had to say about that.
We don't want another family to go through what we are going through, and our vision is to establish a trust called Dolly's Dream. Through this trust, we hope to raise awareness around bullying, anxiety, depression, and obviously youth suicide. It won't bring our Dolly back, but it may just prevent the loss of another young life. It should not have taken the loss of a young life to drive this change, but this is where our journey will start.
Such moving words there, Danica, from Tick Everett, the father of Dolly Everett, who was speaking here at the Casuarina Street Primary School in Catherine East. It was his Facebook post on Sunday that really sent this story not just around the country but around the world. In fact, people, including Hollywood actress Bette Midler, have tweeted about Dolly's story and hope that it can do something to change this tragic circumstance that has seen so many people take their own lives. Tick Everett said he was moved by the overwhelming response that his family has received since he posted that message on Facebook on Sunday. He's also said that he's not someone who follows politics. He said he doesn't even know which political party is in power at the moment, but he said that he welcomed Malcolm Turnbull's comments saying that he would vow to crack down on on bullying on social media. Some of Dolly's friends also spoke to the media outside the funeral today. They said that they hadn't known how serious things had become and how they wished that they'd been able to do more. Take a listen.
Look, I think everyone who knew Dolly, when they found out what happened, they would have asked themselves, was there something I could do? Did I miss something? Did I not see something? Did I say something wrong? Has she taken something I've said in the wrong way? It's very hard for all of us. I know we've all asked ourselves those questions.
Danica, an incredibly sad day here in Catherine today, but one that Dolly Everett's family hope will bring some lasting change and hopefully prevent the loss of more young lives in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Matt Cunningham, appreciate your updates on this story. Thank you.
Yeah, I might just pause there for a sec. They mentioned Bette Midler. Back in August, around August 2013, I think it was, I went out and visited Ebony Simpson's mum, and I filmed some wedge-tailed eagles that day, 2 wedge-tailed eagles that were doing some incredible acrobatics on a day that was really windy, and there was a strong front coming through, and the wedge-tailed eagles were surfing the wind. And that night when I was talking to Ebony's mum and her partner Gunther, something really extraordinary happened. It was at a pivotal moment in the conversation where Gunther was saying some really deep stuff to me. And I had told them that night that I'm gay and, working after school care, and the battle I had with people, the stigma that was around a gay guy working in after school care in terms of on social media. I got totally ignored whenever I mentioned kids. And just as Gunther was replying to me, the song Wind Beneath My Wings came on the radio by Bette Midler. And because they mentioned Bette Midler just there, I thought I would mention that. the next story relates to Centrelink, I think, and I might just say that after I got out of the psych unit, I was forced to stay in there for a month after going to New South Wales Mental Health for help. I was placed in a mental health institution under the Mental Health Act, and that I found it completely demolishes all your rights as a citizen. You have no rights whatsoever once you're put in a mental health facility. And that's all they have to do. Quote the Mental Health Act to you and all your rights are instantly gone. And I was suicidal because immigration banned my partner from the country after he overstayed his student visa. And he didn't overstay by much. He overstayed because I was suicidal just before he left. And I was suicidal because he was leaving. And I was at a point in my life where I really needed a best friend, my best friend. The thought of losing him was enough to make me suicidal, so you can imagine the mess I was after he left. And after he told me they banned me, I can't come back for 3 years. And I'm not in a financial position to travel overseas, so it completely and utterly wrecked me. And he couldn't return, I couldn't go there, we were separated. We've been separated ever since, by force, by this government, who I would describe as being the worst bullies I've ever encountered in my life. And Malcolm Turnbull, I don't doubt his sincerity when it comes to caring about the victims of suicide, because he was very good about the death of Stuart Kelly, who also killed himself as a result of bullying at school. But honestly, if you're going to have someone like Peter Dutton heading Immigration and Border Protection and heading up a department as powerful as Home Affairs, then you are not setting an example for the country that says no to bullying. You are actually setting an example that says that bullying is the way to the top if you want to have power over people. And I mentioned this book. Well, Daniel loves having power over people. He's like those bad politicians who like to have total power and control over others. Daniel doesn't use fear to get what he wants. He just uses force through his brother. He manipulates his brother, who has a psychic gift, and gets him to use that psychic gift to deliver what Daniel wants. Interesting comparison. But anyway, I got forced off work because I was told I could not work. Either it was no work on a medical certificate, or I had to work a minimum, 20 hours or 30 hours. It was more than I could do anyway per week. And so I stayed on a medical certificate for 6 months longer than I wanted to, which meant I was completely off work, unable to work, completely cut off from everything I knew, as well as my partner. So that was Centrelink doing their part to bully the crap out of me in 2016 after I got, out of the psych unit. And it's just, I don't think government could have done any more to harm me, to be honest, than what they did. And I'm still really appalled by it all. I would not go to mental health if my life depended on it, literally. I'm scared of them. I was left absolutely petrified of the psychiatrists after they threatened to hold me down and inject me with medication that I seriously did not need. I mean, just because I'm open-minded about coincidences and synchronicity, meaningful coincidence, the idea that it's possible for someone who's dead to get a message to you. I mean, doesn't Peter Dutton call himself a Christian? Doesn't Donald Trump call himself a Christian? Aren't these people who believe in spiritual stuff? Or is it only their version of spiritual stuff, their version of Jesus and their version of God that's okay? Because I can tell you now, Peter Dutton's department showed absolutely no mercy on me, as they've shown no mercy on asylum seekers who have been, in many cases, genuine refugees, held in captivity for years and years. And might I just add that, speaking of being held in captivity against your free will, the time that I was in the psychiatric unit, which was almost a month, cost the taxpayer around $6,000 per day. And I did not want to be in there. I did not need to be in there. I was left more traumatized, far more traumatized than I was before I was put in the place. And I'm not the only one of the people I knew in there who had an attitude, who described the psychiatrists as evil. In fact, one of the other patients, they don't call them patients, they call people in a psychiatric unit these days consumers, believe it or not. You're a consumer, not a patient. And the psychologist of one of the other people in there, one of the other patients, because I'm not going to use the term consumer, I think that's ridiculous. The psychologist of one of the other patients described the psychiatrists in that place as evil. He said they're just power hungry and they enjoy having power over other people, obviously, because she also was kept in there a full month longer than she needed to be and a full month longer than she wanted to be. And there was no reason for her to be in there either, I can guarantee you.
Moving on now, and almost $3 billion in welfare payments have been overpaid by the government due to fraud and errors. The Human Services Department overpaid recipients $2.84 billion through fraud or error last financial year. 2.4 million people were given more money than they were entitled to, but less than half of that was recovered. Debt collectors recovered $126 million through deductions from ongoing payments, while the federal government probed just 1 in 10 reports of cheating. Only 709 people were prosecuted. Human Services Minister Michael Keenan says the coalition will continue working to increase recovery rates.
Our compliance efforts are working. Several years ago we collected $1.2 billion. Last financial year we collected $1.6 billion, and we're going to continue to find new ways, particularly through data matching, for example, to make sure that we can recoup money that has been overpaid through the welfare system, because all Australians can expect that that system will operate with 100% integrity. If you've inadvertently made a mistake, then we will work with you to get that money repaid, but you will need to repay it. But if you've been defrauding the system, then you can expect that we will come down on you like a ton of bricks.
Labor says today's reports show the government's incompetence when it comes to the management of Centrelink.
If someone cheats the system, they should be forced to repay the money back. We've got no problem with that. But when you look at 709 prosecutions out of a total of 5.1 million Australians who receive payments, this is not the biggest problem that this government is facing. This is a government that is incompetent in terms of its technology, incompetent in terms of its handling of its workforce, incompetent when it comes to running a government department. They are not fit for government.
Home Affairs Minister Peter Dutton has outraged members of the legal community by blaming a spike in youth crime in Victoria on soft sentencing. As Sky News Melbourne reporter Annalise Nielsen explains, it comes as Victoria Police convenes the African Australian Community Task Force for the first time.
Home Affairs Minister Peter Dutton has criticised the Victorian Premier over his handling of a spike in crime among African teenagers in Melbourne as the politicians trade barbs over whether it is indeed a crisis. The war of words started when Peter Dutton said Victorians were too scared to go out for dinner. Premier Andrews called the comments nonsense, but it's comments made to Sky News that's continuing to inflame the issue. Minister Dutton arguing it's a soft approach on sentencing that's allowed crime to escalate in African communities.
At the moment, Victorians are hearing a Premier say that he doesn't think there's a problem and that he's, spending all of this time with these red herrings of come down for dinner and all this garbage. He needs to get out and speak to some of the victims of the crime. He needs to admit that he's made a problem. He needs to apologise to the Victorian public, and if he can't rectify the problem, he needs to consider his own position.
The Australian Judicial Conference, which represents judges, was outraged by the comments, saying in a statement, it's unfair in that the judges and magistrates in question cannot respond, and it undermines the capacity of the judiciary to apply the law impartially. It's as Victoria Police convenes the first meeting of the African Australian Community Task Force. The task force is supported by senior members of the African community here in Melbourne. Victoria Police hope they'll be able to identify at-risk youths and provide more proactive solutions to prevent antisocial behaviour. Annalise Nielsen, Sky News, Melbourne.
And to discuss this further, I'm joined live now by the President of the Victorian branch of the Australian Lawyers Alliance, Tom Ballantyne. Tom, thank you so much for your time today. What are your thoughts on Peter Dutton's comments that Victoria's civil libertarian judges are to blame for the youth violence?
Thanks for having me. Look, they're remarkable, frankly, and completely inappropriate and uninformed. The separation of powers is the central pillar of our democracy and one of the most important checks on the abuse of executive power. And so for a federal government to attack a judiciary in that way is completely inappropriate and frankly a really concerning trend. It's also the second time in 12 months that the federal government or ministers of the federal government have actually launched an attack. And we'll recall last year when a number of ministers faced the prospect of contempt of court charges and were also forced into an apology and back down.
The Judicial Conference of Australia has slammed the comments as inappropriate, saying it's unfair to criticise judges who can't respond without compromising their own impartiality. So do you think it's appropriate for federal ministers to be commenting on judges' decisions?
No, absolutely not. The independence of the judiciary is extremely important for the workings of our criminal justice system, for the workings of our democracy. The judges, quite rightly, are not responding. That's not their role, and nor should they have to respond to such things. The government really should be showing leadership in this area and allowing the courts to do its work.
Sentencing has become a hot topic in Victoria, with the opposition joining Minister Dutton in calls for an increase in mandatory sentences. Are Victorian judges soft on sentencing?
It's not for me to say really, but I personally don't believe so. The Victorian justice system has undergone a number of changes. There's been an overhaul of the bail system following on from the tragic Jill Marr case, and Victoria now actually has some of the most onerous bail laws in the country. So no, I don't believe there's any evidence that Victorian judges are soft when it comes to sentencing.
The Victorian opposition is calling for an increase in mandatory sentencing. Is this the solution then to youth crime?
Absolutely not. Youth crime is an incredibly complicated issue and it's multifactorial. We have to talk about poverty, we have to talk about educational opportunities. There are all sorts of factors that go into youth crime and crime rates. Mandatory detention really has been shown in numerous places not to work. Crime rates haven't fallen. Mass incarceration does not help reduce crime. What we know does work is working with communities, working with young offenders in order to prevent repeat offences.
Do you think that we need to see perhaps more funding into this rehabilitation service? I know that Peter Dutton was asked about it, saying no, that funding hasn't been cut to try and rehabilitate young violent youths. Would you like to see more money invested?
Certainly more money helps, but also perhaps a change in the nature of the debate. We always seem to have such emotive language used, and particularly Peter Dutton has been a prime example of that. It really confuses the real issues, and I think it would be really helpful if we not only had more funding, but also had a more sophisticated debate about the causes of youth crime and the solutions for it.
Do you think at the moment there's a lot of mixed messages? We're hearing different opinions from the federal government, different opinions from the state government and the opposition, and there's a lot of commentary surrounding this, but there's no real facts in place to try and solve this in the short term.
Look, that's very true. There are mixed messages, but I would say that the people we should be listening to are those that deal with this on a daily level, and that's the Victorian Police. And if you go back to what they've been saying, they've been very clear that there is not a particular crisis with crime. There's no particular problem with any community, any particular community. And those are the people that I would trust to really have the best idea of what's going on. We also know that the crime rates have been dropping steadily since 2008 in Victoria. So if people are looking for a solution to this or looking for a response, my view would be that we should let the police do their job. Today we've seen the start of the community task force. We know that engagement with communities, if there's a particular crime issue or a particular issue with security, is the most powerful tool for the police to respond. If we further marginalise or isolate offenders and their community, we really just undermine the ability of police to actually respond and solve the problem. And Peter Dutton's comments have done nothing but increase that problem. He knows that, though. It was a point made very well by George Brandis in response to Paul Enhance's Burkestan in the context of terrorism.
Certainly a big issue, and a lot of the key issues trying to be raised today. President of the Victorian branch of the Australian Lawyers Alliance, Tom Ballantyne, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Moving on now, the life support machine of former Home and Away actress Jessica Falkholt has been switched off. The 28-year-old was critically injured in a fiery Boxing Day crash, which killed her parents and younger sister on the New South Wales south coast. She remains in a critical condition in Sydney's St George Hospital.
The decision to turn off the life support system for Jessica fewer than 48 hours after the poignant pictures emerged of the funeral service for her father Lars, mother Vivian and sister Annabelle closes the final chapter on the tragedy of Boxing Day 2017 that claimed a close-knit and loving family.
And I want you to know I completely forgive you.
The 29-year-old former star of the television series Home and Away fought for life for 2 weeks before the injuries she sustained finally took their toll. The accident on the New South Wales far south coast also claimed the life of drug-affected driver Craig Whittle, now known to be a persistent traffic offender who served 4 jail terms because of his disregard for the law and his refusal to obey driving disqualification. 50-year-old Whittle's record shows 10 counts of driving while disqualified and 60 other convictions, which resulted in the courts declaring him an habitual offender. But he'd been granted a restricted P-plate licence on the grounds he needed it to attend a methadone clinic. On his way home from that clinic in Nowra, Whittle drove his Toyota Prado onto the wrong side of the road and head-on into the Falkholt's family car. Police continue their investigations into the crash as they prepare their report for the coroner. Terry Galloway, Sky News.
And that's another point. When the government says you have to work minimum amount of hours when you're dealing with someone who's got some mental issues, which I don't deny I've got some mental issues, but I did not need the medication they were trying to force me to take in that psychiatric unit. I've got no issues with taking antidepressants when I need them and all the rest, but the attitude of those psychiatrists was just so unhelpful. I was traumatized by my experience in that place, and then I had the government forcing me. I couldn't work at all for 6 months, so I'm cut off from everyone at my work, all my work friends and the kids that I work with, completely cut off from them when I shouldn't have been. And then they try to bully you into working more than you can, more than what I'm capable, because one of the problems I've got is I live 45 minutes away from where I can work. 45 minutes is a clear run if there's no traffic. And one of the things I have problems with is driver fatigue. It's a big problem for me if I don't get enough rest. And that simply is not a factor when the government's determining how much someone's capable of working. I have been very clear about the fact that if I'm forced to work too much, I'm very happy to work within my capability. But if I'm forced to work beyond what I can work, and I can't do the big hours that some people do, and the hours Centrelink was demanding me to do were hours that would have completely stopped my payments anyway. I wouldn't have qualified for any payments if I was working the hours they insisted. So I don't understand that. And to have that kind of pressure on you all the time, relentlessly, it's not good. And you know, it's just another aspect of what I feel has been, I just feel like I've been a victim of bullying by the government, the federal government of Australia, just relentlessly. And it all really started with immigration and border protection, basically banning my partner and my best friend from the country. And it's not like I had a lot of close people that I was close to. It's not like I had a lot of close friends. And he was my first partner, the first person I'd ever been with. So heartbreaking, horror for me as an individual. And yeah, my heart is in this prediction. I really want to send a message against bullies. Bullies who are at the top of the powers that be, who are setting a terrible example for the world. And I would definitely include Donald Trump in this. And I would definitely include Peter Dutton.
The Education Minister says today's national report into outcomes for universities